Ruan. Please, if you would like to start, you're most than welcome. Okay, sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to this talk. So yes, I am quite obsessed with wasps, and hopefully after this talk, you'll also be a little bit more. So today's talk is how we can use modern technology to capture more biodiversity data, and specifically on insects. And insects are actually the most abundant organisms in the world, things you can see. And but because of their small size, they're often not appreciated, and people aren't aware of the biodiversity that is there. And so in today's talk, we're going to talk about an existing platform, and then also this idea that my brother and I had to create an app to almost serve as a portal to send to encourage more citizens to capture data, and specifically our problems are on invasive wasps. But without further ado, let me start. So firstly, if you've heard of iNaturalist, it's a fantastic platform. And basically, anyone who has a smartphone can take a picture of an organism and also a GPS point and upload that to the internet or the cloud. And then if two experts can agree on the species identification, that becomes a research grade observation that can be captured in GBIF. And it's part of biodiversity data. So very exciting. And I'm going to show a few slides that came from exactly in this form from iNaturalist webinar that happened the other day. And it shows some very nice high-level graphs of what this thing actually looks like. So when we did the webinar, I think it was at 6 in the evening in South Africa, and I think iNat operates out of California. But in that hour, there were 5,000 observations that were expected to be captured in that hour, and 12,000 identifications. So the whole time it accumulates. So over time, it's building up really quickly into a very big data set. So yeah, there you can see. So the global biodiversity information facility, that's open source information on biodiversity, and that is run by the world's governments to make sure that biodiversity data is available to make decisions. And then iNaturalist, when data becomes research grade, it's sent automatically to GBIF. So the data that citizens are capturing becomes then part of the global data on biodiversity. So this is a really cool graph to look at, because if you look at the top there, so at the top of the figure, we're having 6 million observations per month that's going into the platform. And over time, so what's very interesting, iNaturalist started as an MSc project way back in 2009, I think. And then it slowly started, and now we're starting to see exponential growth. And you may ask, why is there this funny jigsaw pattern? And that is actually the Northern Hemisphere summer, when everyone is outside busy taking pictures. So actually what we should try and do in the Southern Hemisphere is to start to push up those troughs, so we start leveling it out, so to contribute more data from the Southern Hemisphere. And then also, if you compare it to other data sources, it covers the most species. So you see, when this slide was made, it's still under 400,000 species. It's now even over 400,000 species. And if you compare it to something like eBird, that has a lot more observations, but it's actually doing not very many species. So taxa that are popular, it's not difficult to get data, but what's very tricky is to get more representative of all biodiversity. So iNaturalist does a fantastic job there. Then in terms of images, here we can see the amount of images that are on other large data set, observation.org, and iNaturalist sits up here. So it's not just names on a list or in a Excel file. all of these observations also have pictures. And the same is for sounds. So you can also ID some species on a sound clip. And here, iNaturalists have the second most sounds, only second to Xenocanto. So a really impressive data set. Then if we look at the citing of this data set, iNaturalist also on top. So it has the most citations. And these are some very respectable other data sets. So it just shows it's a leader in this field. And then also this data is used in scientific publications. And here we see the percent of papers and in which topic they fall. So climate change impacts quite a high proportion. But we see here invasive species, which today's talk is a bit about. We see that's also a good percentage. But basically, they also said during the webinar, they don't even know what the data is going to be used at this time because scientists are creative. But by having that data there, it allows science to progress. I just want to look at some of the numbers here. So I drew these figures this morning. So in terms of observations on iNaturalist for all species, there's more than 215 million observations on iNat, covering almost 500,000 species. Those observations were made by 3.4 million people, and then almost 400,000 people were identifying different identifiers verified that data. And if we compare South Africa, so in terms of all biodiversity, we have so far 4.5 million observations covering 40,000 species. But here we really want to encourage people to participate more, that we can push up these numbers a bit, because South Africa, I think Tony may correct me, but South Africa is thought to have about 10% of the world's biodiversity. So the species is probably close there, but in terms of observations, we need many more observations to be made. And then I just want to focus of this talk, insects. Here we see it's almost 600,000 observations. But if you contrast that, about half of all species, all living species that are not bacteria or whatever, things you can see, half of them should be insects. So we're still far down in terms of the proportion of observations that are insects. And there's many reasons for that. But yeah, that's just to put the current data into perspective. And then iNaturalist is basically a social media platform for biodiversity. And it allows you a lot of freedom to have your own style, how you identify things, which taxa interest you. And this is my landing page for my projects. So it's a very nice platform. You can pick a group, set filters, and basically each morning, if you want to go ID stuff, you can have a project that's created. You click on it, and it shows you exactly those observations that fall into your project, and you can quickly do some identification. So we'll go into a few in this talk. So this one is a project I created. I have a collaboration with a paper wasp expert in the United States. And the invasive paper wasp, the European paper wasp that we have in South Africa, is the smallest invasion in the world of that species. And the US has the largest invasion in the world of that species. So it's a very nice comparison between those two countries. So that's the rationale behind it. So what I've put in the filter here is all paper wasps. So this is the subfamily Polystinae, and it's a decent size, 175,000 observations, 51 species, lots of observers, and also a good number of identifiers. And what really sparked my interest, I had a colleague get this book for me from the US, and it's beautifully illustrated, all the social wasps of North America. So these include the paper wasps, the yellow jackets, and the hornets. And each species is meticulously illustrated, both morphology, it's got the differences between the two sexes, color markings, different morphs, and also importantly, a geographic range. So if you have this book in your in your possession and you busy on iNaturalist, when you often get a tricky species, you can go through the book. So there's also interface between the two. So I've talked about the USA and South Africa. So if we just look at South Africa, now observations are only 4,200. So remember, we looked at almost 170,000. So we need a lot more observations on this group. It's only 23 species, and yeah, not that many observers. So I just want to show this as well. When you're on a landing page and you set your filters, each one of these blocks, you can click on it and immediately you get the screen. So you can at a high level already say, oh, that looks interesting. Oh, that doesn't look interesting. Something that's research grade already has 2 experts or identifiers that have consensus about the species. So maybe you rather want to look at something that hasn't a confirmed ID. So it allows a lot of freedom. So then to those 23 species, remember each species is special. It's a biological entity. It undergoes evolution. It has a distribution. It reacts to pressures. And if you don't have species level information, it's very difficult to manage that particular species. You can't take an average of species. It just isn't possible. So here's our 23 species. And if we put that into numbers, in iNaturalist, they can specify invasive species. So that's the pink indication here. And I've made it concurrently in this abundance graph for the different species. So we see in South Africa, most of our paper wasp observation is on a invasive species. And then we have a few that have quite a number, and then a long tail with very few observations. And actually this sort of gets lost in translation. But each one of those columns is a species. And I just want to focus now on this species 19, which is this beautiful wasp. So this is called Rupalidia amabala. So Rupalidia wasps, the common name are small paper wasps. And then you get normal paper wasps, and then you get needle-waisted paper wasps. And this group only occurs in Africa, India, and Australasia and those areas. So it's not in North America, it's not in South America. And it's a very beautifully sculptured insect. So from this structure, you know it's that particular genus. And then this is a stunning insect. Most of these wasps are brown or reddish in color with some yellow markings. Here we have a black wasp with these sort of white markings. So that now if we look at the oldest record for this species on iNat, this was photographed 7 years ago. This is incidentally Tony Rebello's son that's here in the audience today. And Alex has quite a knack for photographing quite interesting insects and other organisms. So on this map, this landing page, you can already see which part of the Western Cape this was photographed. And this star is indicating how many people actually like this picture. Then if we sort of look at when you're interacting with different experts and making the identification. So this is taxonomy, but it's not boring. It's alive. It's people interacting. So Alex would have proposed, he's not sure what it is, so he's saying it's a Hymenoptera. And then this next person will say, okay, it's that genus. And then we have, I just want to put the sort of pedigree of these people. So in terms of iNat, you can rate people. And it's almost like a friendly competition. So how many observations do you have? How many species have you in your collection? How many identifications have you made? And so on and so on. So that book I showed, that beautifully illustrated book of North America, the author is actually also on iNaturalist. So you have someone who's doing it digitally and is writing books about it. It's fantastic. And then if we look at the other two, so B. Dagley has almost 600,000 identifications. So this person is a real workhorse going through all these records and turning them from observations into research grade data. And then here we have a person, this is an actual taxonomist, And it's also a modern taxonomist because he's actually using iNaturalist. And yeah, maybe only 9,000, almost 10,000 identifications, but it is a lot. And this person has a different job on the platform. So. Okay, sorry. So you remember I said this Osrin is a taxonomist, so he's a paper wasp specialist, and specifically Rhopalidia and also some of the others. So here he and Simon van Oort, who's a colleague of mine from the Iziko Museums in Cape Town, they actually, after that observation, they collected a specimen, and then this is another platform, is Wasp Web. It's almost more taxonomic, not so much the observation. But here, the holotype, the actual physical record has been captured, and it's now in a taxonomic collection, so physically. And this is the first time it's been described as in South Africa and a new species. So it's exciting. 7 years ago, it's the first time someone photographed this species, and now it's described, and before we didn't know about it. And it's not an isolated case. Here we have a Polistes wasp, and this person who's made all this observation, also a very serious iNatter with almost 40,000 observations. Beautiful part of the world, near St. Lucia. And again, posting the identification, getting closer to the genus from a iNatter, and then here Polasek is weighing in, saying, okay, it's this species, and it's the first time he's seen the species. So that's now 2 we've looked in this small group. There are many, many things that haven't been photographed and described, and here we see someone else now saying, oh, it looks interesting to something they took in 2008. So it also works backwards, but the whole time data is being captured. And then I just want to show this profile. This is actually a younger user. I'm not going to say his age. I've seen he's taken his age off his description. But he says here, I love hornets and studying them. I live in Indiana and I want to be an entomologist. And he's already sitting at almost 6,000 identifications. So this is a young person that's using this tool and has a particular liking of a group and is busy getting skilled in it. Okay. Here we have the other group I talked about, the needle-waisted wasps, Melanogaster. That's what it means. And you can see very, very different morphology from the others. So for South Africa on iNat, we have 5 species and not very many observations. And this one species only has 1 observation. So I just quickly want to focus on it. So it's Melanogaster fascialis. You get lots of information here, but at the click of a button, you immediately into some hardcore taxonomy. So now you can see, I talked about the paper wasps, it's down here. Saying it's an insect is up here, and Hymenoptera is there. So insects, there's so much diversity that at a very high level, we have 27 orders of insects. So you can find a particular one you like or have an interest in, and then you can drill down, and then it's a long road till you get to the actual species. And here, if you have the species name, now we see in the rest of Africa, there's actually 4 records in total. Maybe some genetic work is required in future just to see that these ones, are they very different from these ones? But let's say this is the known distribution of the species. It's a species that has been poorly sampled and probably will remain poorly sampled for quite a long time just because of its geographic distribution. But at least now it's captured on iNaturalist. Okay, so now to jump to another project I've made. It's very convenient to make an iNaturalist, and this is on the European paper wasp, Polistes dominula. And I've set the filters that all European observations are excluded. So by definition, everywhere else it's invasive. It shouldn't be there. Here we see for globe, there's almost 42,000 observations for this species. And now you're familiar with how the statistics and things are given. Again, the newest observations are on top. When you want to see more, you say view all. It can show you the map. So you can look by geography, or you can go picture by picture. And then if I specify South Africa, now you see from more than 40,000, it falls to almost just 500. So it could be that we have still a very small invasion, and we see most of these observation points on this region of South Africa, with only one here in Oudtshoorn. And again, you see all the different pictures and which ones are research grade and which not. So essentially now we have a very detailed picture of the distribution of the species, and it almost took no effort to get to this point. Yeah, so here we have an artist who did this drawing for actually one of my PhD students almost 10 years ago. And we're going to use this as our emblem for this wasp. So it's also an artist's perspective on the species, but it's a beautiful insect. And if we zoom in, we see there are quite a few points, but still it's quite patchy. And then what we want to know in this invasive distribution, is it that no one recorded it there, or is it a true absence? Okay, so this gave us the idea for this reporting tool that we want, or an app. And I asked my brother, because it's sort of his field, and we discussed, I think it was over a family dinner, we said, let's try and do this. So that's what actually started this talk today. So why would we need this tool? We want to detect new invasive spread of this species in South Africa, have it at a very fine level, so that you can do GIS with the information. And currently it's only in the Greater Cape Town area, and as I say, that one jump dispersal in Oudtshoorn, but the rest of South Africa, there are no records for this species. So if we have precise distribution data, or better yet, if we get a ping outside the known distribution, that should initiate some response, or at least that one can react to that. And then very importantly, we want to make people more aware of invasive social wasps. So I just quickly want to talk about this point here. So it's a massive jump, and this observation actually came from Facebook. I had a colleague who sent the Facebook record to me, and I contacted the person who made the post, and I said, please put your observation on iNaturalist. And this turned out to be a male European paper wasp, and it was at a touristy place in Oudtshoorn, and we think that wasp hitchhiked with tourists to that spot. And this is what's happening. People are inadvertently moving the wasps around, and in most cases, it maybe fails, or it's a male, so it's not a queen. She can't start a nest. But it's just a matter of time, because there's so many people, there's so many goods going in different directions. This is also what we're trying to capture and be able to deal with. So in South Africa, we have two invasive social wasp species. And a social wasp means there's the wasps live together, so there'd be a queen and then workers, and that allows division of labor and also makes the species like a superorganism. And superficially, these two look very similar because they're black and yellow, but this is our paper wasp, this is our target species, and this is the German wasp, which is a yellow jacket. It's a completely different, so this would be Polystinae, this would be Vespinae, so it's a different subfamily. And then just some basic ways to tell them apart. This species of paper wasp has orange antennae, and the yellow jacket has black antennae. And if you look carefully, there are some differences, quite key differences, but to an untrained eye, probably not. Okay, then we can also, when people phone me and say, oh, I've seen a German wasp, now I've seen a European wasp, I try and ask, if I don't have a picture, what were they doing? Where were they nesting? Sorry for the crude drawings. When they fly, how does it look? Are their legs pulled up or do the legs hang? Is it a nervous flight or is it a lazy flight? So this side, it would be European piper wasp, and this side, it would be the German wasp. So this is only, in South Africa, we only have the two options of these invasive wasps. Here's sort of a shot of a European piper wasp nest. So just to explain the biology, each cell is made to contain one egg's laid in the cell. The larvae hatch. That larvae then has to be fed individually by workers, and then it develops, and then the larvae would grow up. It would make a little silk plug. It starts to pupate, and only after it becomes an adult, it would chew through the silk plug and then emerge as a worker to help the rest of the colony grow even further. And here you can see an example of this massive growth to a small nest, then later expanding even outside the cavity in which it was built. And here we have a native piper wasp species. I'm not going to venture identification now, but usually smaller and this sort of brown color. So it's not very difficult to say this is invasive and this is native. Okay, but if you have more options, it's often more difficult to say what is what. So here we have a honeybee. I hope all of you can see that's a honeybee and that it's not a wasp. Here we have Polistes marginalis, which is a native piper wasp in this part of South Africa. This is neither. It's not a piper wasp. This is a eumenid, a potter wasp. Here we have our wasp we're after. Here's the German wasp. And this is a different family, and that is a pollen wasp. And again, there's mimicry that has developed. So the yellow jackets have nasty stings, and over time, mimicry has evolved, and other insect species that look like them get left alone because predators learn that is not something you mess with. But this confuses humans unless you learn the species. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to my brother. So you wouldn't believe it, but I usually say very little, and he says quite a lot. So.
Cool. Hello, everybody. I must say, I remembered he does really like wasps a lot and bees as well. He was always getting stung by taking bees, rescuing bees out of the swimming pool. But yeah, so I think the whole idea of this wasp reporting tool is to really broaden the net. I think you see an application like iNaturalist and you think, okay, this is a really successful platform that they've built, and it's pitched to a specific target market, somebody who's much more involved, much more interested in these things. And if you think about how many other people there are outside of that community, and I think the idea is we want to see if we can extend science outwards to citizen science, is the term that my brother is using. So if you want to get people to help you, there has to be something in it for them. So there's so many apps out there. There's so many websites. Everybody is so saturated with these things, and people are busy. So if we want to pull this off, we really have to address this. So what? Why do you actually want to report these things and help people like Ruan do this and get this biodiversity data? So the challenge we have is actually not a tech problem, it's a marketing problem. And, you know, we need to answer this, what's in it for me, and the so what, and reduce that friction. We need to make it seamless for somebody on their smartphone to start capturing data for us. So things like catchphrases. I don't know if this is the right catchphrase, but I mean, the point is, I know personally just from WhatsApp groups that people are very irritated by these wasps. They get stung a lot. So this is something where people are really frustrated. And if they can see that something is being done about it, they might want to get involved. I think people are really starved for good news stories these days. So when you build something and you can really scope it down to a very simple concept, to a vertical application. So it's a vertical slice of iNaturalist. We're not recreating it. We're just skinning it very differently to have a clear value focus. We're going to build in an educational aspect. So all these things that my brother is talking about in terms of taxonomy, which is a dying art, we're going to specifically teach people to identify the wasps. Then, we're going to have focused branding, and that's going to dovetail with social media. We have such a good opportunity with social media to reach people and to get them excited actually about, we will have videos of, for example, them in their wasp suits taking out nests. Things like that is what gets people mobilized. And then obviously gamification, which you can see on iNaturalist, they do well. They get people to compete. So we have a couple of challenges. So for example, we don't want to create our own data pool. We want to register users so that they are registered on iNaturalist. So we have to sort of make them understand that they are signing up to a platform, and we don't want to confuse them. So, in terms of don't make me think, there's a few challenges that we have to do. Luckily, iNaturalist is a very open platform from a tech perspective. So it's open source, and they have very good APIs. Now, APIs is how systems talk to each other. So our system will be able to speak to iNaturalist, and then we will be able to fetch data out of iNaturalist and present it in our app. And we will also be able to feed data into iNaturalist. And I'll show a diagram of that now. We're going to do things like have a little quiz, like a taxonomy, show a few screens. This is how you identify the app, and then we'll randomly pull some images and say, is this a European paper wasp? And then you can get a score, and then you could get a badge for that. These are things that we're going to test and see if we can teach people how to identify. And this is the thing. We don't know where this journey will end. The most important thing is we need to get something live. We need to test the concept. We need to get feedback from people. And then we are going to keep on refining the concept. And hopefully we can pull it off. We don't know. And we don't really know what we'll end up with until we do it. We really don't want to reinvent the wheel. So, iNaturalist, as Ruan showed, what's so amazing about it is that it's connecting people. So if we provide an additional funnel to onboard people, and maybe some of those people actually go on to become these serious taxonomists, that will also be a great benefit. So we've done some design work in terms of what this app will look like. And I mean, basically what it's going to come down to is that people will sign up, we'll onboard them, we'll be able to show them stats, weekly stats of how many observations are coming through. We'll have articles, educational stuff about how to identify the wasps, news about wasp removals, things like that. We'll be able to show data to people. And then also you will be able to see at least your own sightings and whether they are verified. So we're not going to make it overly complicated in the beginning. Obviously, as time goes by, we can consider bringing through comments from iNaturalists and things like that. And then, we can award people badges. But I think we're going to really try and keep it simple just to get this going. Just building this is already quite a lot of work. So how it works is that, from the phone, you need to have systems in the cloud. So we'll have our own API that our app will talk to, which will then our own server will have our own configured educational content, and then we will have our own integration with iNaturalist, which we will then pull data, push data or pull data. But the platform is very open. So the app will also make calls directly to iNaturalist, which will make it less expensive for us and easier to scale. And then, my, scientist can actually just log into the portal directly and see the content. So that also saves us a lot of work in terms of not building a whole system. Yes, and then I think the most important aspect of this project will be to use social media correctly. So I think this is where probably the most effort ideally should go in, and that is just having a campaign informing people that there is an app like this, and then showing them good news stories or funny stories, or I don't know, getting getting stung by a wasp or something like that. Who knows? But the point is we have to generate awareness. There's some really great initiatives out there. I don't know if any of you have seen Ocean Watch and Sungai Watch, people cleaning up rivers, cleaning up plastic in the ocean, and people are really using social media well to generate awareness these days. Yeah, and then back to Ruan.
Excellent. Okay, so as Alex said, we don't know yet how good it's going to be, but I think the idea has appeal. So our vision is then to make the use of AI and citizen science much bigger and targeted for our purpose, and show in this way how we could deal with invasive insect problems. So our mission is to, as Alex showed, keep the barrier to entry quite low, recruit more people, and if we win, iNaturalist wins as well. And then, yeah, as I say, inspire people to participate, and it promotes multidisciplinary science also in South Africa, and that we appreciate our biodiversity, because this has been very heavily focused on biodiversity. But as I've said, as soon as we have the data, then all sorts of other things can happen: mathematical modeling, climate change predictions. But the better your data, the better those type of exercises are also going to be. So just our project goals, we're hoping to capture about 10,000 observations per year. So the season, people will start complaining about wasps from about December as the colonies grow. And some people are even surprised. You'll show them a nest and then they didn't see it, but 3 months later it's massive, and then you point it out to them. So, and then let's say for a year, then 40,000 observations. So it's ambitious, but that would be several orders of magnitude more than the iNat data that's for this specific species in South Africa. And then we want all of these or most of them, to go through to iNaturalist as research grade and then go on to GBIF. And what we're also going to do, which actually Alex is helping my work, is that we can have alarms for when things pop up in places where they weren't before or shouldn't be. And then also, as part of this project, when we generate the data, that's going to be used by MSc student registering next year. And in those 2 years, hopefully she'll have lots of data. And then we'll show this sort of mathematical modeling, also collaborating with Kang Hui, who's also part of NITheCS. Okay, so as you can tell, this talk, fan of wasps and a big fan of iNaturalist. When I get a chance to speak to school children, I also always mention the platform, because you're always left with a thing: what can you do? How can you take part? This is a very nice way to take part. And we've talked about wasps. There are also other insects that cause people harm, and they can have economic impacts. But they are, and here we have an example. So this is some other wasps that I work on, also with a international network, and including the Southern Hemisphere, several countries, and then also the USA, where the German wasp is invasive as well. And then in some of those countries also its sister species, the common wasp. And sort of the things we're interested in is what is the social wasp biodiversity? Why do some species invade and others not? If one can sort of understand that, and now with climate change and as things rapidly change, we don't know if there's going to be a chance for other species to invade. So it's a dynamic process, and things are constantly changing. But by working with so many countries, you get a macro ecological perspective. So if we see they're doing poorly in that country and it's predominantly dry there, it gives you an idea of what it should do in another range that possibly doesn't have the wasp already. And then also early detection work and rapid response is sort of a more practical side, and that's something that if resources are there, the South African National Biodiversity Institute would like to do. But then there's also beneficial insects. So there's lots of insects that give benefits to humans. So our crop pollinators, dung beetles that remove dung, predators and parasitoids of pest insects, which then prevent crop damage, ants that disperse seeds, and nutrient cycling by insects and also other invertebrates. And as part of this initiative of making insects, bringing them to the fore, we are going to create the Bee Research Hub and the African honeybee, which we have 2 subspecies in South Africa, is for the first time going to be included in the National Biodiversity Assessment, and it's going to explain the complexity of this species. But again, we're trying to make people aware, because people think it's a honeybee, oh, it's part of agriculture, but it intersects with natural areas. It's a wild species, then it's captured by beekeepers and it's being managed as a managed species. So it's a very complex interactions, and if you don't have modern ways of capturing that data, these things are not going to be managed sustainably. Here we have another example, another insect that's going to be in the NBA, and this is the Mupani worm, which some of you may have tasted before, but it's a beautiful caterpillar, and when it becomes an adult, that's what the adult moth looks like. And this is another species where there's very, very poor data in terms of where the species occurs and in terms of abundance, because it's a boom-bust species. So some years or some places, there's a lot of them, they get harvested, and in other places you can hardly collect them. So on my PhD, I did it on a silk moth that had very similar, African silk moth that had very similar population dynamics. And this, again, with this platform, encouraging people to use iNaturalist, we can start capturing better data on these important species as well. And then my last little promotion is of Wizarku, which is a scientific magazine making mathematics more popular. This one issue was called Demystifying Mathematics. And the idea is so those are 2 of the past issues. And now we're going to have, for next year, at the end of next year, an issue is going to be released on the value of insects. So this is going to combine some of the things I've shown, the wasp app. We're going to do a story in this magazine. So this will be a nice showcase of active entomological projects and biodiversity data, and also why it's important for humans. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, you can email me, and we look forward to your feedback. Thank you.
Very much, Ruan and Alex. Are there questions for our team here? Okay, there's a question over there. And we need to keep an eye on our online audience. They might also have questions. Please.
When you mentioned about the wraps, what do you call it? Wasps, the one I feel my finger hurts because last year I was bite by it. So I was so can you mention? I mean, this is a very non-academic question. Okay, if I'm being bite again, what is the best way to deal with my finger?
So you're not being bitten, you're being stung.
Oh, yes, stung.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
No, but I'm saying, so a lot of people are confused. So when you go to the pharmacy, don't ask for something for insect bites. You must ask for insect stings. So for example, there is a product in South Africa, it's a hydrocortisol. And if you put the that ointment on where you were stung, that will start to break down the proteins in the insect venom, and then you will have less of a reaction. You can also take antihistamine just for if there's any allergic reaction.
All right. Okay.
But yes, so this is the trick. I want people to take a picture, but they mustn't get stung.
Okay, okay, okay. So I will chase you down for the treatment.
Okay.
And the other thing is you mentioned about invasive. Is this mainly this? Is the reason of these invasive species from Europe? Is it because of climate change or what? What is the reason that they sort of?
I think a lot of
come to
these
this
invasions happened quite in the recent past, or let's say the 80s or the 70s. But we are also seeing still current invasions. So a very good example is the Asian hornet, which arrived in France in 2004, and it's now the worst invasive insect in Europe. So the point is, with global change, with the world being so connected, the chance of something being taken to a new place is very good. And what makes the social wasp special is that you need one mated queen. And if she's in her behavior, she thinks she's hibernating, you move that thing in which she's hibernated somewhere else. When she wakes up, she's just in a new place. She doesn't know. And they just carry on doing what they do. And then you've started an invasion by accident.
And what is the normal route of this, she's being removed? I mean, in which way? Because I won't pack these wasps in my suitcase. And in which way that they were removed from they were moved from Europe to South Africa? In which way usually?
So in South Africa, we're not 100% sure. But for example, New Zealand's yellow jacket invasion was of aircraft parts that were sent to New Zealand from England in the Second World War. And then some of the wasps were hibernating in the crates that were shipped. And then those first nests that were built were next to the airport. So this is you only have a very short window, those few years, because when the invasion's still localized. That's why something like this app, if we get a ping in a new place, you only have a very short window to do something about it. And if you leave it, then it could maybe look like Cape Town again, and a lot of people being affected.
Any less medical question?
Thank you for your presentation. So I was being involved in a project about biological control of aphids using parasitic wasps. So I don't know if wasps and parasitic wasps are under the same family, but my question is, can this invasive wasp be useful for biological controls?
Yeah. So
I mean, for biological controls, yes.
I understand 100% what you're saying. So there is a scientist in the UK, Syrian Summers, who promotes wasps because wasps get a lot of bad press because they sting people. So where the wasp is native, it's a good thing. It eats insect pests. It's doing an ecosystem service. But for example, in South Africa, we don't have any native hornets. So the species we have here aren't used to something like that. So now you're putting in a new organism and it has an impact. And you're quite right. It would probably do the same thing. It's also going to eat pests in South Africa and be of some benefit. But the better it does, the more impacts it's going to have, and the more problems it's going to cause humans. So the better that species does, the more invasive impacts it has. So there's no way of really of managing that. So it's like a wild thing. How are you going to manage that? So.
I have a comment and a question for you. So the comment would be, if you're targeting people interested in trail walking, for example. We saw the hype around the win of the Chelsea Flower Show, the Fynbos Trail, the exhibition in Stanford. So you've got a lot of people all interested in the Fynbos of the Western Cape. And then the second comment would be, if you're a birding enthusiast, the fun thing to do with an app would be to go on to Birdle every day, and slowly you get to learn about more birds, the regions they occupy, what they feed on, how they perch, etc. Is that the sort of thing that you want to do with your WASP app?
Superficially, yes. So we actually don't want people that are going to the Chelsea Flower Show. We want someone who hardly goes outside. We want everyone who's annoyed, who sees what's this weird thing, must partake. So you don't have to make a huge contribution, but if we can get a lot of people to send data, that'll make a nice, it's a big net to catch things. But of course, did you want to say something?
I think the important thing is, like, anybody can stand here and say, oh, we're going to build something. But I think it's that if you build it, they will come type idea. So I think if we can get something out there to a level of competency that people will actually use it and not get frustrated, initially we'll probably have more geeks than laymen. But if we can grow that slice out, and once we can show we have adoption numbers, it's very easy to start partnering and doing partnerships with people like, and I don't want to know names because I don't want to cause pressure, but we could go and get people and say, do you want to give a reward for somebody who's on the top of the leaderboard? And you might win win rewards. So there's a lot of potential once you have the user adoption. So it really is that thing that we want, but it's a catch-22. So we want to build something, get the user adoption, and then we want to market the hell out of it.
I use iNaturalist, and the one thing that I found as a very kind of layman user is I only take photos of things that I find kind of interesting and that I don't know what they are. But then iNaturalist always asks me to now make a suggestion, but I'm not taking photos of the things that I already know what they are. So with your app, how does that work? Do you need to make a suggestion? Will the identifiers identify everything, or how does that work? Because that's my I mean, that's my reward, is
before your answer,
having
Alex,
someone tell me what the thing is that I'm interested in.
Your disclaimer at the start. If you have a particular thing you like, go for it. Make observations or identify it, because there's so many different people, so many choices people make. If we get someone to do one thing good in the bigger system, we're going to cover everything. But you want to answer the identification?
Yes. So iNaturalist will take a guess at what it is, right?
Yeah,
but
AI.
I think it's really important in UX to encourage users to feel safe to make mistakes. So in what we're doing, we're going to say, we specifically want you to photograph this invasive wasp species. But if you accidentally take a photo of something that is not a European paper wasp, we're not going to explode your device. We're going to encourage you to say, okay, so I think that's where the feedback loop comes in. And these things take time to build and to master and to user test. So I can't exactly tell you what, but I think the idea will be to create a friendly interface where it's okay to make a mistake. But it's easier when it's a vertical application, because we can show you examples and say, this is exactly what we're looking for. And then we can eventually cast the net wider. I would love to take the lessons we learn here and build something for finding water leaks. Partner with somebody like City of Cape Town and find water leaks and get citizen reporting. So this is really a greater initiative of, can you mobilize people to collect data for you?
Yeah, I have another question regarding the honeybee. the honeybee is absolutely my friend because I eat their product. The question is, I can see there are several, different kinds of honeybee. Is each honeybee tied to one particular flower? Like, when I buy honey, like there is a wild flower which is very popular. Also, you could what is utilities? Yeah,
Yes.
that's the correct word. Is this things that has one-to-one correspondence, or they can just take honey from any flower?
So usually what happens, the honeybees, because it's a social insect, it goes for a nectar or pollen source that's abundant. So it's not going to go for that single little plant individual. It's looking for large forage. And then if that particular thing is flowering, for that time that the honeybees work that flower, the product you're going to get is then a sample of that plant, and it'll have a particular taste. And you could have the same species growing somewhere else with slightly different soil and other conditions, and the honey would taste different. So that's what makes it so special. The biodiversity of the plants interacting with the honeybee gives you a different product as the honey. Yeah, so it's actually amazing.
Have any questions from our online participants? Maybe Dean can ask those questions. Oh, Donovan, please.
Okay. First question, I want to ask, have you ever noticed that citizen science observation image is more complex than iNaturalist? The insects are very small, while iNaturalist data shows very high resolution insects. This difference may lead to the failure of AI models. Not entirely sure what that means.
Yeah. So iNaturalist, I've looked at some of the things, and if you maybe have a South African insect or whatever, it's sometimes tricky to get an ID. But I work a lot identifying things in the USA, paper wasps, and the suggestions from the AI is often so good that if I'm slightly unsure and I'm leading towards something, if the AI says I think it's that as well, it helps you make the right choice. So it is a tool, but definitely the more data there is and it can pull it in, the better that diagnostic tool. With the iNaturalist webinar, what they also showed, so for insects, you don't want the insect tiny in a big picture because your identifier has to look for it and maybe the resolution is poor. Sometimes people are afraid of bees and wasps and the picture's from really far. But if at least the quality is good, you can zoom in. So sometimes I zoom in the picture. And then for the ID, I just need a color and maybe a pattern. Then I know it's that. And if you identify things where they're invasive, it's a bit of a cheat because there's not many options. But some of the things, if there's multiple species and they're quite cryptic, you don't know which one it is. iNat is, it's not a solution to those complex problems. But I think to capture more data, to make more people passionate about biodiversity data, then those cryptic ones will also get covered eventually.
Okay, if there are no more questions, then thank you very much,
Thank you
Ruan
very
and
much.
Alex. Thank you very much. It was really exciting. Let's hope we have lots of new citizen scientists among us after this talk. And to